Hey, patrons. I wanted to let you know about a project that I did a little thing for this year. Um, I don't know whether you've seen me post it on Facebook, but this is Resistance, the LGBT fight against fascism in World War II. Okay, I'm just probably going to look backwards on you. Written by Avery Cassell, edited by Diane Kanzler, and I wrote the foreword. And there are illustrations in it that are suitable for coloring, like that. But it turned out to be a really important book about the topic and so much more than a coloring book, although absolutely you can color in it. Um, when they approached me to write the foreword to this, I actually resisted because I'm not a historian, because I looked at the list of people that they'd done profiles and pictures of, and I said, wow, I don't know most of these people. But they persisted, and I thought you might like to actually hear the foreword that I wrote. And by the way, they made me a character, which is kind of awesome. Particularly since it looks like I have a great Jufro in that picture. So when they asked me to do the foreword to this book, my immediate answer was no. I'm not an academician, I'm not a historian, I didn't even know most of the names of the people being highlighted in this amazing collection of chiaroscuros. When they asked me to reconsider, I was still hesitant. Right now, the world feels like an awful place. There is a hateful dictator wannabe in the White House, and a man accused of raping at least one woman has been sworn into the Supreme Court. Immigrant families are being separated at our borders, and hundreds of their children have disappeared in the process. More and more women are speaking out about sexual abuse, and more acts of violent racism and homophobia are splashed across the headlines, and this was even before the shooting in the Pittsburgh synagogue. Every day feels like we are facing another wave of attacks on civil liberties, democracy, justice, and common decency. To be honest, I don't even do my own writing as much as I should, much less write introductions for other people, because I feel lost in despair and existential dread. Still, they persisted. One must respect the persistence of righteous voices. So I read the bios of some of the activists highlighted in this book, and as I did, I realized I did know more about them than I guessed I would, but not enough about them, except for a very few. See, here's the thing. When historians write biographies, they can choose to emphasize or remove parts of the story that help drive the narrative of the person they're talking about. As a novelist, I do the same thing. Why tell you parts that don't drive the story forward? That's my editor's complaint to me. Anyway, why would Alberta Hunter, who headed the first all-black USO show and had a 30-year singing career, suddenly leave at the height of her fame to become a nurse? The biographies simply state, when her mother died, Hunter left singing and went to nursing school, period. It must have been a terrible loss for her, a mother who was likely born into slavery and remained by her daughter's side all her life. But Hunter also hid her singing career from her fellow nurses for decades. Was she suffering from emotional fatigue, from the persistent toxin of systemic racism and sexism that faces independent black women? Or was it an act of freedom for herself? Then there's Shored Baker, Frida Belenfante, Willem and Arondius, and their friends who bombed the Amsterdam Public Records Office so that the Jewish population of that city could not be identified and sent to concentration camps. It doesn't take away from this righteous act that the actual design and implementation of this event sounds like a really badly plotted caper movie. I imagine them bolstering each other's confidence and misgivings with schnapps-enhanced bravado and songs of resistance, leaning in on each other's love as they planned an action that could only lead to their death. So many of these stories end in death that came way too soon. I was particularly struck by the inclusion of bar owners in this collection, and, thinking of the queer bar owners I've known in my life, I had to ask, did they go into business to create a place for radical activists like themselves to meet? Not likely. They went into business because they thought they could make money. and to give folks like them a place to feel safe while they drank. I remember talking to my friend Chuck Renslow, of blessed memory, who owned Chicago's Gold Coast Bar, where he started what became the International Mr. Leather contest. He wasn't planning to create a worldwide event celebrating BDSM and leather clothing. He started the contest to inspire men to stay in the bar longer and buy more beer while they admired the very sexy contestants. That doesn't take away from Chuck, or from Lotte Hamm, or Bette Van Brien in this book. What it does is humanize them for me. We may now think of them as very brave, opening such radical places that became community centers for queers, outsiders, rebels, and shady characters of their time. But I also think it's equally likely that they opened and ran those businesses for the simple reason that no other bars would want those patrons. And when they saw the dangers coming to their community, they did their best to warn others, but as business owners, it wasn't likely they had the freedom to leave quickly themselves. Lotte and Bette are reminders that most of us don't decide as children to grow up to be activists. Activism is often thrust upon us because the way we look, the spaces we take up, the lovers and the voices and the stories we share. Activism, whether in the corporate world of lobbyists and boardrooms, or the scrappy resistance grown out of frustration and anguish in the face of unbearable loss, or just because our backs are up against the walls and we reach out to clasp the hands of anyone near us for comfort and a sense of solidarity, that's all one story. The story of people who, nevertheless, persisted. That doesn't make these people any less revolutionary. It allows for us to see them, though, as human. In the cracks of the stories the biographers have dug up about these amazing radicals and visionaries, there must have been moments of rage, grief, betrayal, despair, fear, dread. All these emotions I'm currently feeling. Take Tatum Kalu, Africa, who learned at age 17 from his South African parents that he was adopted, and oh yes, he wasn't white. Or Nadine Huang, a successful attorney and daughter of diplomats surviving in the Ravensbrück death camp. Or like Alan Turing, who helped win World War II, but would never be publicly thanked for it. Alan was instead arrested, tortured by his own government, and driven to suicide. Good historians do their best to stick with facts. Written documents, recollections of those who lived in the time, comparisons of times and dates. Of course, if family, friends, or editors and other gatekeepers work to obscure those facts because of homophobia, sexism, or racism, their life is harder to uncover. So no, I'm not a learned person. I'm not a historian. I am a fiction writer. But fiction is just the distillation of real stories we live, bound together in a pleasing shape. And much like the array of drawings in this book, you will soon bring your story to life in glorious colors. Just don't mistake pleasing shape for easy or ending happily. The tragedies and drama of fiction come from the worst things that we have ever done to each other in all of human history. These activists face dark and fearful times. Their written histories may only include the actions they took, but my curious mind fills in the feelings they must have experienced as well. I want to know that my feelings of rage and despair were felt by other queer people at other times in history. I want to read what they did, even while feeling these moments now. I want to feel a camaraderie, a continuum of progress in the great struggles that span generations. I want to draw strength from our commonalities while honoring their heroism and seeing it reflected anew in the faces of teenagers marching for their lives and fists held up in staunch unity, sweeping through the streets past scenes of modern martyrdom, in the suburban moms discovering their voices while urban punks exhaust their own, in the subversive, secret online groups, and the furious shouts making red-faced white men seek refuge in their private elevators and toilets away from the howls of wounded women. May we all draw strength as we paint in the colors. May we all continue the work in comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Because as we see the people in this collection you hold, the foundations have been laid for us over generations. We are not required to complete the repair of the world, the rabbis remind us, but we are not excused from those labors. Use every color you have. This is Resistance, the LGBT Fight Against Fascism in World War II. It is available now. You could find it on Amazon and other quality vendors. It's $18, which is a bargain, considering how long and beautiful it is. And I really highly suggest you get it, because soon you could be coloring all the heroes of our distant and not so distant past, and perhaps inspire a little hero in your life. So thanks for listening.